We're ready to start our next conversation, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Keoki Jackson, who was our speaker on Tuesday morning. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager for MITRE's National Security Sector. Thanks, Keoki.
So MITRE is a not-for-profit corporation that has the mission of solving problems for a safer world. More relevant to today's discussion, MITRE was founded in 1958 to develop the nation's first automated air defense system for the newly created North American Air Defense Command, or NORAD. NORAD is integrated and aligned with U.S. Northern Command, which was established in 2002 to defend the United States in cooperation with and in support of our allies, partners, and civil authorities. I'm pleased to introduce a fireside chat with General Glen VanHerck, Commander, NORAD, and Northcom. General VanHerck has served in the United States Air Force for 35 years with more than 3,200 flight hours as a pilot, flight examiner, and weapons school instructor. Previously, he served as Director of the Joint Staff at the Pentagon. General VanHerck will be in conversation today with Steve Clemons, founding editor of Semaphore, a new global news platform. General, Steve, the floor is yours.
Keoki, thank you so much. General, it's great to be with you. You know, I would tell everybody that one thing I'll just take off table real quick is, many of you know NORAD as the Santa Tracker. I know the Santa Tracker is something that's kept NORAD in the news every year, every Christmas. But I want to, be serious for a moment. I started my career as a young guy many years ago at the RAND Corporation, at the RAND UCLA Center for the Study of Soviet International Behavior. It was called SIB. And we used to, have a facility and talk about arms control, SLICMs, GLICMs, ICBMs, and how important air defense and over-the-horizon radar and defenses were. And then the Soviet Union disappeared. Then Russia seemed to be a friend for a while, then it wasn't. All that seems to have come back now today. And as it's come back, I'm really interested in what your dashboard looks like. And I should tell our audience, just to make the point, you wear two command hats. You're a double-hatted commander with two separate sets of nightmares to worry about. So what does that strategic dashboard look like? And is it bifurcated? And are you, when you have your nightmares, have to have them on different sides of your brain?
Well, first of all, if I do have a nightmare, it is failing at tracking Santa Claus. So I can't have that happen. But so what I like to tell people is the two commands, I'm privileged to command two fantastic ones, are separate lines of authorities, bosses, Canadian side, U.S. side, through the secretary on both of them, through the chief of the defense staff, to the minister, the prime minister on the NORAD side as well. But they're really inseparable commands. And so as I go about my day-to-day business, and when I talk here today, what you're going to find is I will be wearing both hats, and in the span of a conversation, talk about multiple roles, and you won't even know when I'm talking as the commander of NORAD or the commander of United States Northern Command.
So when you're in this, you're sort of thinking about the roles and functions you have. What are the up-at-night issues that you had last night about our safety here in Aspen and around the country?
Well, I sleep pretty good at night, Steve. I'll be honest with you, and you should too, and all of you. We've got a fantastic strategic deterrent, the finest conventional forces on the planet. What I would tell you challenges us is the unknown. And what I mean by the unknown is domain awareness challenges. The first one I would tell you is undersea domain awareness. As competitors develop capabilities, the challenges of monitoring submarines in the future will only grow. Same thing for domain awareness challenges for hypersonic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles. Cyber domain awareness is a significant challenge. So what I don't know is a challenge. Now, the good news is we're working to fix this, and the department did a fantastic job in the budget this year, the president's budget, for domain awareness. There's 4 over-the-horizon radars in the budget, so I look forward to that. NORAD modernization, Minister Anand just announced their plan with 2 over-the-horizon radars for the polar aspect of that. In the budget is additional capability for the Navy for undersea domain awareness. So I'm very encouraged with where we're going, but we still have some challenges to work on.
Now, just a few weeks ago, an Air Force general named Glen VanHerck made this statement. My assessment today is I don't have what I need as far as artificial intelligence and machine learning to give the decision space to the President, Secretary of Defense, the Chief of Defense Staff in Canada, the Minister of Defense, and the Prime Minister in Canada. And my understanding was you were asking for about $30 million, which was not, a lot in defense land, but do you have what you need? You just gave a compliment to the Biden administration that you feel like you've made progress, but when it comes to AI, quantum, new evolving technologies in this threat, are you where you want us to be?
No, the answer's definitely no, Steve. We need to go faster in developing these capabilities. When I talk domain awareness, now when you have information and data, the question is, how are you going to process that and disseminate it in a timely manner? So what I'm trying to do is create decision space. Decision space equals deterrence options for the President, for the Secretary, for the Prime Minister, and the Minister in Canada. And the way you do that is through analyzing that data and information, that domain awareness data, through the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence. The machines can count numbers of cars in parking lots, numbers of vehicles in weapons loading areas, and alert you to changes. Today, oftentimes, we don't use the machines to analyze that data in a timely manner. So I do think we can go faster there.
How do you test your team and yourself to get away from habits of the mind and practice that may not see surprises around the corner? In other words, I'm asking, a lot of stuff just has inertia built in it. You do tomorrow a little bit like what you did yesterday. But my understanding is at one time NORAD did a simulation and you worried about airplanes becoming weapons before 9/11/2001. But the rest of the defense system never picked that up. So I'm interested in how you challenge one's patterns of thinking and habits creatively so that we can be smarter about security.
Well, you embrace a diverse culture around you, different minds, people who think differently. If you align yourself with folks that look like you, think like you, act like you, and have the same background, you tend to not get what I would say, answers like you're talking about that are innovative. You rely on academia, institutions, you rely on industry and others, and you challenge them to think about future problems that we may face. We're facing problems today. We have to solve those and be ready each and every day to defend our homeland and have the watch 24/7. But we also need to think about the future. And that's what we're doing with our strategy, is how do we position ourselves for 2030? We have a homeland defense design for 2030. And don't think about homeland defense as being kinetic in-game defeat and shooting down cruise missiles over the homeland. We don't want to put a Patriot and a THAAD on every corner. But you can utilize the electromagnetic spectrum. You can utilize deception capabilities, resiliency, and hardening to do defense differently in the future. I would say it comes down to more than just defense. It comes down to campaigning, which is part of integrated deterrence. And the department has done a great job with the National Defense Strategy, okay? We put our strategy out in December of 20, which was focused on integrated deterrence. And so when you think about defense, what I want to do is get way further left through the innovation and using that data and information to give the President and the Secretary decision space to create those deterrence options.
I just want to do this as a sidebar because there's a lot of important stuff we can get into, but at the end of the Trump administration and moving into the Biden administration, we had a lot of media and press writing about chains of command, who had authority to do what. Did General Milley have the right to, jump into, a command by the president to potentially launch nuclear weapons, et cetera? But there were a lot of questions about process and decision making. And as I told you when we walked in here, I was an Air Force brat. I grew up on Department of Defense installations. My dad was in the Air Force. I very rarely saw messed up decision making process, but we did have it in this country. Has that been worked out? Were you ever in a position yourself that you worried about how some of your compatriots were receiving command orders?
No, I haven't been in a situation where I was concerned about command orders or potential compromise of the chain of command. What I would tell you is the way we do command orders needs to adapt and change because the environment is going faster and faster, and to stay relevant as the information and data environment changes, we need to think and use the capabilities, the data that I talked about, to collaborate globally on a single pane of glass, to make an assessment globally of the threat, to create deterrence and defeat options globally, and to analyze whether they're actually executable. Today, oftentimes, that takes days, if not weeks, and it comes to the Pentagon, even at my level, not globally integrated. We can do that much faster and give command orders much faster. Now, you'll have to change the processes, and you'll have to use mission command, which is the delegation of authority to really utilize the speed that we can with data and information in the future.
Now, I'm going to overstate this for effect, but I'm going to remind you of something that I think you've said in the past, that we have a big blind spot in how we look at regional security in the United States and in North America, that a threat that happens here is not just regional, and we don't need just regional decision makers. It has global consequence, global impact, and needs global response. So can you tell us what that means? Can you unpack that?
Well, Steve, there are no regional problems anymore. So China is not so.
But we have a lot of regional commands.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And those are gaps and seams that can be exploited. And so what I'm talking about is collaborating globally in real time across those gaps and seams for not only the geographic combatant commanders, but the functional combatant commanders, so we have a global picture. We do need to change, I think, how we do our strategies, our plans, the way we do global force management, theater security cooperation, et cetera, exercises. So let me tell you, our strategies and plans, for the most part, start off with a regional crisis or conflict. And we build them out, utilize the joint force from a regional perspective. There are no regional problems anymore. China will be a global problem, is a global problem today. And so I would rather start off with a global perspective, with the Secretary providing global risk, global resources, where he will not accept risk globally, apply the joint force to that problem set, and then create your regional plan. Today we do it just the opposite, backwards. On global force management, the joint force is not nearly large enough to do everything that we would like to do. But we need to think about force management and sharing forces differently across those gaps and seams, those lines you talk about. In addition to that, we have an opportunity to utilize global force management, which today is done separately from exercises, which is done separately from theater security cooperation. All of those activities, investments, operations, exercises have a deterrent value when messaged properly. And so we have to think about those as a whole from a global and all-domain perspective.
So you just tested some of those seams and the assumptions and biases that are built into security. And I have to say, I bet if we polled this room about what NORAD's chief obsession was, it would be over-the-horizon Northern Hemisphere threats, but you've also got to worry about the South. Can you tell us a little about Operation Noble Defender, what you learned, and how we're prepared for threats from the South as well as the North?
Well, we just completed a Noble Defender demonstrating capability to look south. China's recent fractional orbital bombardment test, which...
Can you just tell me what that means in, like, street language?
That was the ICBM they launched.
Okay.
That orbited the...
So that's a hypersonic.
It orbited the globe with a hypersonic that re-entered the atmosphere at Mach 19 from the south and flew across the Pacific Ocean and landed in China. That came from the south. We're challenged with having sensors to look to the south today. Noble Defender is part of my campaign plan to demonstrate our readiness, capability, our resiliency to operate from all axes of threats that come to the homeland. That's what the Noble Defender is.
And what, given that experiment and what we did, as you look at the future of what you need from Washington, D.C., what do you need to amp up, the muscular infrastructure on that front?
Well, the president's budget's sitting with Congress right now to appropriate funds for that. I need them to appropriate the funds for the over-the-horizon radars to support the undersea domain awareness that we're talking about. Additional Arctic infrastructure capabilities, communication capabilities, those things so we can compete in the Arctic. My AOR goes all the way from the North Pole to Central America, and we have to be able to operate across all of those areas. I do think we have opportunities to change the way we acquire capability. We're an industrial age-based process in the department built on buying ships, planes, airplanes, those kinds of things. In today's digital world, data world, We need to go faster in developing those. And I think you can accept a little more risk, do things more in parallel, not necessarily serial, and field things much quicker. I think there's opportunities.
I don't mean to interrupt, but John, does your gut feel to tell you that that's the direction we're going? Because, you know, you've been a very loud voice saying we need information dominance, we need faster movement, and so my sense is you're pounding both on your friends at the Pentagon and on Congress to do this. Do you feel it's going that way?
Absolutely, I'm doing exactly what you just said. I do think it's going the right direction. The Vice Chairman, the Deputy Secretary have been very aggressive with providing funds for innovation capabilities to the combatant commanders. The budget has additional capabilities in it for Joint All-Domain Command and Control. That's a lot of what I'm talking about. But I do think there's other things. You ask, what can we do in Washington, D.C.? You know, our FIDEP spread over 5 years with the annual budget in the colors of money. Very hard to move money around in the year of execution. And I totally respect Congress's oversight role. But, you know, when you're updating your software every 14 days in a digital environment, you can adapt quickly. We have to look at the policies and laws that don't allow us to go as fast as we need to go in the environment we're in today.
You know, we had on stage earlier today Richard Moore, who's the head of MI6 in the UK. He made a statement that maybe we're hyping some of the threats too much, that the Chinese are not 10 feet tall, the Russians may be depleting themselves, which I understand as a perspective. But from a perspective of looking at threats, and I'm sure that you are a target of a lot of interest by those in China and Russia trying to penetrate your world. What is your sense of how tall the Chinese are and how depleted the Russians are?
Well, let me just say first, we have the most powerful military on the planet. There's no doubt about that. But the Chinese want to displace us, and they're on a path to gain significant capability. They're modernizing their nuclear forces at a rapid rate. They're developing conventional capabilities. We see that with their hypersonics. And so they're on a path to approach a peer status with us. I want to talk about Russia, okay? I don't want to say that, you know, Russia has failed. They have struggled in the land domain. What I would tell you is in their conventional capabilities, their long-range standoff capabilities, they're displaying significant capability. That's the threat that I worry about to the homeland. So I would not undersell Russia, and I would not say China is 10 feet tall right now, but they do certainly have aspirations to compete at a peer level with us.
You know, you made an interesting statement, and I have to admit that I don't fully understand it, but my sense is that you are worried that the Russians or other origins of threats may try to use non-traditional things, you know, maybe not ICBMs or cruise missiles over the horizon, but other elements that we're not prepared for to threaten our security. And it reminded me of something that Russia's been trying to animate in places like Latvia, you know, going there and, you know, animate weaponized migration, because it's really not in the NATO defense book on how to protect Latvian political stability from migration on its border. But you were saying there are non-traditional things that our rivals could do that we don't have a playbook for. Can you share a little bit, you know, about that with us?
Well, first of all, we're under attack every day. Let me be clear about that. In the information space, our strategic competitors, potential adversaries, fan the flames of internal strife and discord in our country to expand that, to undermine our democracy. That is happening every single day. In the cyber domain, we're under attack on a day-to-day basis. But what I'm talking about is cyber kind of capabilities to limit our power projection, to delay and disrupt our force flow in a regional crisis, or to destroy our will. And their goal would be to think they could prevent us from entering a regional crisis. That's one. If you look at what COVID did and the pandemic itself, and you saw how it significantly had impact economically on large nations, et cetera, you know, I worry in the future about the potential for biological pandemic type of weapons. Those are things that we have to look at and ensure that we're not positioning ourselves to be vulnerable to those kind of threats.
Do Russia and China have their own version of a NORAD? I know not, you know, North American, of course, but their own sort of facility that approximates the kind of security provision that you do?
I wouldn't say they have anything like NORAD. By the way, our asymmetric advantage is our network of allies and partners. Okay, China and Russia don't have that. They do have air defense centers, air defense sectors in their countries. They have significant integrated air and missile defense systems to defend their homeland as well.
What if you can say this, I'm not sure you can with the president's budget there, but I feel like you're a pretty candid guy. What are Washington's biggest blind spots about the challenges you have?
Well, the first thing I would say is, and one of the reasons that I'm here speaking to you, is understanding the threat to the homeland. You know, there's a perception out there by many held, and for good reason, for many decades, we could project power from the homeland to any place at our own time and place of choosing. That's no longer the case. You know, two big moats on each side, the Atlantic and the Pacific, have served us well. But now capabilities are being developed to utilize those. Russia's the primary military threat to the homeland today. They're an acute threat, but the long-term existential threat is the Chinese, and they're developing capabilities about 5 to 10 years behind Russia kinetically to hold our homeland at risk. Today, they hold the homeland at risk cyber and certainly in space capabilities and the information space as well.
You wrote a piece with a person who's a general who's head of, I think, U.S. Transportation Command, saying fighting to get into the fight. And you have a lot of worry that we have layered a lot of barriers to be able to handle those threats to infrastructure in the homeland. How would you fix it? What's the short form way to fix it?
Well, we're on our way to fixing that. And the first thing I would say is we need to do the analysis and figure out what we must defend that could bring us to our knees to prevent our force flow in a time of crisis.
So this along the lines of Colonial Pipeline or other issues along those lines?
These are the single points of failure or things that we would rely on in a time of crisis to flow the forces. The good news is, for the last 2 years I've been in command, I've been talking to the department about this, and the department has moved this ball way down the field, and I have policy. But it's just not DOD. We have to have a whole-of-nation discussion about the vulnerabilities we have. Some of the challenges that we have. First of all, I don't believe that Russia or China is going to attack us out of the blue kinetically. That's something that I don't fear, I don't look at, but I do believe in a time of crisis they would start with non-kinetic activities to attempt to disrupt us. Now, what's crucial about this, and everybody needs to understand, is that the vast majority of our critical infrastructure that we rely on to deploy those forces in a timely manner is not in DOD or even federal control and for protection. It relies in municipalities, state, industry, et cetera, that we rely on. So those are unknown spots for me. And I heard in the prior panel, I think it was Michelle Flournoy talking about companies who are afraid to admit they may be vulnerable or have been exposed. Those are blind spots that we've got to fix.
You know, we have a lot of people watching online and out in a cooler area on screen right now. Some of them are super experts on national security and foreign policy, and some of them are lay people who are just interested in knowing how the world's putting itself together and where it's going. What do you think are so talk to the lay person right now. What are some of the most important misconceptions that they may have inadvertently about our security?
Well, I just mentioned one, that we're a sanctuary, we're safe here. We can't be attacked in our homeland. We're actually being attacked every day in the information and cyberspace. I would say that's the first one, the misperception about that.
And I would say, just as we finish up soon here, the panel coming up next, which I also have the privilege of moderating, is going to get into the question of what can fiction or what can interesting out-of-the-box collaborations with, games makers and, movie production facilities and fiction writers do to broaden our mind or to contribute to national security. And I ask this hesitantly, because, my last real reflection on NORAD in pop culture was around 1981, and it was War Games with Matthew Broderick. I don't know if you let Matthew Broderick in on the property anymore, but so when you look at that and you think about fiction, is our next panel useful to you in any way at all? Absolutely.
So I recently wrote an article, and I believe I testified to the same thing. Innovation is something that we need, and letting industry or academia's minds run wild about how to solve the problems that we face every day is good. I talked about surrounding yourself with people that think like you, act like you. You don't get that innovation of where you're going. And so what you're talking about is wargaming, innovative, and thinking about the problems differently than we do today. I welcome that and look forward to that panel.
And in our last minute, I'm going to ask you another question, because this is sort of a non-traditional part of security of the homeland and the Northern Command. But the Pentagon and all of its many appendages have a huge impact on what we do as a nation and as a world to deal with climate change and changing environmental factors that are impacting people around the world. And I know that the Department of Defense has put it out to security, but I'd just be interested as a security equation here as you think of climate. In your Northern Command hat, what are the issues for you there?
Well, it affects me both my Northern Command and NORAD hat, okay? So as climate change...
Is there anything that doesn't affect both hats?
There are some things. You're going to put me on the spot. Let me answer this question for you. So what's going on? Absolutely, climate change is happening. It's creating opportunities and it's creating vulnerabilities. The question is, what are we going to do for both of those? As the sea ice melts, commerce can now travel much quicker through the north. You have access to more resources. What's happening is, just as you see what's happening in Ukraine with Russia's irresponsible and illegal behavior, is they're trying to change the norms and the rules that have existed since the end of World War II, and China's right on their heels. We're going to see friction in the Arctic based on resource challenges and land claim, undersea bed claims, those types of things. And so we have to be present. We have to be there to ensure that we have stability as we go forward in the Arctic.
I just want to thank you so much. You've filled out much that we did not know about the role of NORAD in the Northern Command. Please give a round of applause to General Glen VanHerck, Commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, and Commander of U.S. Northern Command. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.